having a bit of trouble relinquishing myself to sleep, so I'm gonna read some, and I figure that there's no good audio for this. Oh, we're tilting. There's no real good audio for this book, so I'm just gonna do my best. The only other option on YouTube right now, as of today, was a Microsoft Sam, like robot voice, and it was pretty god awful. So if you click this video, then you probably know where it is. But yeah, I'm gonna try to slowly, maybe like 5 pages a day, get through Being in Nothingness. And if you want to listen to me read it out loud, hopefully this keeps me accountable and entertained, and someone gets some use out of this. I'm skipping all of the like preface and introduction. If I needed to know it, he should have put it in the book. I'm nauseous. Introduction. The pursuit of being. The phenomenon. Modern thought has realized considerable progress by reducing existence to a series of appearances which manifest it. Its aims was not to overcome a certain number of dualisms, which have embarrassed philosophy, and to replace them by the monism of the phenomenon. Has the attempt been successful? In the first place, we certainly thus get rid of that dualism which in the existent opposes interior to exterior. There is no longer an exterior for the existent, if one means by that a superficial covering which hides from sight the true nature of the object. And this true nature, in turn, if it is to be the secret reality of the thing, which one can have a presentiment of, or which one can suppose but never can reach, because it is in the interior of the object under consideration, the nature no longer exists. The appearances which manifest the existent are neither interior nor exterior. They are all equal. They all refer to other experiences, and none of them is privileged. Force, for example, is not a metaphysical conatus of an unknown kind which hides behind its effects, accelerations, deviations, etc. It is the totality of these effects. Similarly, an electric current does not have a secret reverse side. It is nothing but the totality of the physical chemical actions which manifest it. Electrolysis, the incandescence of carbon filament, the displacement of the needle of a galvanometer, etc. No one of these actions alone is sufficient to reveal it, but no action indicates anything which is behind itself. It indicates only itself and the total series. The obvious conclusion is that the dualism of being and appearance is no longer entitled to any legal status within philosophy. The appearance refers to the total series of appearances, and not to the hidden reality which would drain to itself all the being of the existent. And the appearance, for its part, is not an inconsistent manifestation of this being. To the existent that men had believed in nominal realities, they had presented appearance as a pure negative. It was that which is not being. It had no other being than that of illusion and error. But even this being was borrowed. It was itself a pretense, and philosophers met with the greatest resistance, and philosophers met with the greatest difficulty in maintaining cohesion and existence in the appearance, so that it should not itself be reabsorbed into the depths of non-phenomenal being. But if we once get away from what Nietzsche called the illusion of worlds behind the scene, and if we no longer believe in the being behind the appearance, and the appearance becomes full positivity, its essence is an appearing, which is no longer opposed to being, but on the contrary is the measure of it. For the being of an existent is exactly what it appears. Thus we arrive at the idea of the phenomenon, as such as we can find, for example, in the phenomenology of Husserl or of Heidegger. The phenomenon, or the relative absolute. The phenomenon remains, for to appear supposes in essence somebody to whom to appear. But it does not have the double relativity of Kant's. Oh man, it looks like it's Austrian. Erscheinung. Yeah. It does not point over its shoulder to a true being which would be, for it, absolute. What it is absolutely for it reveals itself as it is. The phenomenon can be studied and described as such, for it is absolutely indicative of itself. The duality of potency and act falls by the same stroke. The act is everything. Behind the act there is neither potency nor hekis, which is from Greek. Sartre seems to have ignored the rough breathing and writes exis. Okay, so he just misspelled a Greek word. The act falls by the same stroke. The act is everything. Behind the act there is neither potency, nor hexis, nor virtue. We shall refuse, for example, to understand by genius in the sense in which we say that Proust had genius, or that he was a genius, a particular capacity to produce certain works which was not exhausted exactly in producing them. The genius of Proust is neither the work considered in isolation nor the subjective ability to produce it. It is the work considered as the totality of the manifestations of the person. That is why we can equally well reject the dualism of appearance and essence. The appearance does not hide the essence. It reveals it. It is the essence. The essence of an existent is no longer a property sunk in the cavity of this existent. It is the manifest law which presides over the succession of its appearances. It is the principle of the series. To the nominalism of Poincaré, some French name, defining a physical reality, an electric current, for example, as the sum of its various manifestations, Duhem rightly opposed his own theory, which makes of the concept the synthetic unity of these manifestations. To be sure, phenomenology is anything but a nominalism, but essence, as the principle of the series, is definitely only the concatenation of appearances, that is itself an appearance. This explains how it is possible to have an intuition of essences, the Wessenschau of Herschel, for example. The phenomenon being manifests, the phenomenal being manifests itself. It manifests its essence as well as its existence, and is nothing but the well-connected series of its manifestations. Does this mean that by reducing the existent to its manifestations we have succeeded in overcoming all dualism? It seems rather that we have converted them into a new dualism, that of finite and infinite. Yet the existent, in fact, cannot be reduced to a finite series of manifestations, since each one of them is a relation to a subject constantly changing. Although an object may disclose itself only through a single Abschattung, that sounds German. The sole fact that there being a subject implies the possibility of multiplying the points of view on that Abschattung. This suffices to multiply to infinity the Abschattung under consideration. I need to look up Abschattung, don't we? But my phone's in use and my computer's closed. Well, we will write a note. Look up Abschattung from page 5. We're only on page 5, baby. Okay. Furthermore, if the series of appearances were finite, that would mean that the first appearances do not have the possibility of reappearing, which is absurd, and that they can be all given at once, which is still more absurd. Let us understand, indeed, that our theory of the phenomenon has replaced the reality of the thing by the objectivity of the phenomenon, and that it has basis on an appeal to infinity. The reality of that cup, that water bottle, that cup, is that it is there and that it is not me. We shall interpret this by saying that the series of its appearances is bound by a principle which does not depend on any whim, but the appearance is reduced to itself and without reference to the series of which it is a part, could be only an intuitive and subjective plenitude. The matter in which the subject is affected, if the phenomenon is to reveal itself as transcendent, it is necessary that the subject himself transcend the appearance towards the total series of which it is a member. He must seize red through his impression of red. By red is meant the principle of the series, the electric current through the electrolysis, etc. But if the transcendence of the object is based on the necessity of causing the appearance to be always transcended, the result is that on principle an object posits the series of its appearances as infinite. Thus the appearance, which is finite, indicates itself in its finitude. But at the same time, in order to be grasped as an appearance of which appears, it requires that it be surpassed toward infinity. This new opposition, the finite and the infinite, or better, the infinite in the finite, replaces the dualism of being and appearance. What appears, in fact, is only an aspect of the object, and the object is altogether in that aspect and altogether outside of it. It is altogether within, in that it manifests itself in that aspect, shows itself as the structure of the appearance, which is at the same time the principle of the series. It is altogether outside, for the series itself will never appear, nor can it appear. Thus, the outside is opposed to a new way to the inside, and the being which does not appear, one word connected by hyphens, to the appearance. Similarly, a certain potency returns to inhabit the phenomenon and confer on it a very transcendence, a potency to be developed in a series of real or possible appearances. The genius of Proust, even when reduced to the work produced, is no less equivalent to the infinity of possible points of view which one can take on that work, and which we will call the inexhaustibility of Proust's work. But it is not the inexhaustibility which implies a transcendence and a reference to the infinite. It is not. Is this not an hexus of in the exact moment when one apprehends it on the object? The essence finally is radically severed from the individual appearance, which manifests it, since on principle it is that which must be able to be manifested by an infinite series of individual manifestations. In thus replacing a variety of oppositions by a single dualism on which they are all based, have we gained or lost? This we shall soon see. For the moment, the first consequences of the theory of the phenomenon is that the appearance does not refer to being as Kant's phenomenon refers to the noumenon. Since there is nothing behind the appearance, and since it indicates only itself and the total series of appearances, it cannot be supported by any being other than its own. The appearance cannot be the thin film of nothingness, which separates the being of the subject from absolute being. If the essence of the appearance is an appearing which is no longer opposed to any being, there arises a legitimate problem. Concerning the being of this appearing, it is this problem which will be our first concern, and which will be the point of departure for our inquiry into being and nothingness. That is the end of part 1, the phenomenon, and we got through like a grand total of 5 pages, so can't beat that, right? A little bit of old Sartre in your diet, never hurt nobody. Where's she at? This dog-eared page. Come back. If you tune back in, next time we will be going over the phenomenon of being and the being of the phenomenon. What did you think about that? I hope the recording wasn't too bad, but it will be a little bad. It won't be great. It's on a phone. That gave me a lot of like Ludwig Wittgenstein vibes, like the whole like what you can physically objectively see, what you can perceive with your brain is real, and that's the end of it. But like how far does that stretch? Because, like, if you're alone in the woods and you're going, like, crazy and you're, like, seeing things that aren't there and you're alone in the woods, there's no one around to be like, oh, the series of appearances you're seeing don't match up with mine. You're probably hallucinating, right? So, like, in that situation, that person, I mean, that's all real. So, like, do you have to have a system of peership to be objective? Like, do you have to have that system of other people keeping you in like almost like a minder, like a political minder? Um, in the thing he's talking about, where it used to be we'd see something and then we'd like interpret it, right? And like try to figure out what's going on. It's like one of our ancestors saw lightning and they were like, "Oh, it's the gods." Like that's gone. And but we still tell people that there is a great generative and creative force behind reality. And that it could be your religion, it could be your politics, it could be a lot of different things. It could be your values and your what cultural things you've latched onto. But I mean, these are all products. It's all shit that they sell you. I bought this book. This book is a product. It's shit that they sold me. I mean, Jean-Paul Sartre was not a good person. I don't think he was a moralistic character in the literary and philosophical tradition, but I'm attracted to his theory for whatever reason. Alright, well, we're nearing the 20-minute mark. Should I get Kaufman's? Yeah, here, I'm going to go grab Kaufman's really quick and we can look at that. So let's see if this is existentialism from, you can't really see anything in this image, existentialism from Dostoevsky, or how you say his name, to Sartre. So we're gonna look kind of what Kaufman has picked out. So I've got like 2 copies of this book. So one a professor gave me when he retired, and the other one I think I borrowed it from a professor. She ain't seeing it again. So so it looks like the things they've included in here is The Wall, Self-Deception, Portrait of an Anti-Semite, Existentialism is a Humanism, and Marxism and Existentialism. That last one, I think it sounds pretty cool. Then it's just the mythicist. But yeah, so there's like Kafka and Heidegger. I don't know, Heidegger was considered an existentialist. He probably didn't think he was either. Kierkegaard's in here. Always gotta love some old Johannes de Silencio. So, yeah, so in this, the opening line for page 1 is, existentialism is not a philosophy, but a label for several widely different revolts against traditional philosophy. Most of the living existentialists have repudiated this label, and a bewildered outsider might well conclude that the only thing they have in common is a marked aversion to each other. So, I don't know how these guys are all fans or not. I read Notes from Underground at work the other day. Like over 2 days I listened to it. Good damn book. Good damn book. But yeah. Well, got about 10 seconds together. I hope whoever needs this finds it whenever it's all completed, or at least got a little bit further. So I wound up using a commentary podcast to get into Moby Dick. But they stopped in one of the chapters about dissecting whale anatomy, which, those are the fun chapters. And then they wound up just dropping off the face of the world. So, hope they're okay. But that actually wound up kicking me in gear to wind up reading Moby Dick, and it was a terribly good book. It was mighty good. But yeah. Part of me wants to be like, yeah, whenever I finish this, about being in totality, that might be a cool book. But then I look at the size of this thing. Look at this monster. And there's not much, there's a lot of preface material, but there ain't that much of it. It's a lot. It's big because it's a big book. I think it's 600 pages, so one small hill at a time, right?